What's going on, everyone? This is Cadman Cycling. Welcome in, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good day. Here we are for another Zwift race. This is the Bullseye Points race. It's put on by Herd Racing. This iteration takes place in Richmond on the Fan Flats route. It'll be a lead-in and then 5 laps around the Fan Flats route. Overall, really flat. I'll put the profile up here. Makes it look like there's a bit more elevation there than there actually is. The total race, 29 kilometers, is under 100 meters of elevation. So really flat overall, one sprint each lap, and we'll settle in. So this is a decently long race. I'll be doing a voiceover for the majority of it. We'll speed up in some areas, slow down in other areas, but really enjoyed this race. I thought it was a cool format, so kind of just gonna hang out here, commentate over it, and feel free to jump around in the video if you'd like. It's not like a normal race where it all comes down to the final sprint. There are pretty interesting parts in every lap, especially at that final sprint banner in each lap where the points are given and taken away. So we'll sit in, we'll commentate, and see what we can do here. Like I said, had a lot of fun with this race. Yeah, and just can't wait to share it with you guys. So I have done this race once before, I believe. It was sometime last December. They have this Herd Bullseye Points race, I believe once a week, in certain increments. So there's like different series that go on. The time I did it last time was in Neokio, I believe. It might have been the Neon Flats route, or maybe Sprinter's Playground. Somewhere that had pretty often sprints, much more often than just once a lap. But a really cool series overall. So the way sprint racing is different than kind of scratch racing is what they call the majority of Zwift races. So scratch racing is where it's just first person to the line on the last lap or at the very end of the race wins the race. It kind of all comes down to that final banner. Points racing is a little bit different in terms of there's multiple banners along the way, and there's opportunities to win sprint points as you cross each of those banners. So essentially, the goal at the end is to have as many points as possible, and the person with the most points obviously wins the race. But it really doesn't come down to the last lap. Every single lap is important. So it makes things a little bit faster just because there's sprints and people speeding up early and often within the race. So I think it's a pretty cool race format overall. The way this one is set up is this is a 5-lap race plus this lead-in. So we'll go through 6 different banners. It's always the same banner, once at the end of the lead-in and once at the end of each of the 5 laps. And each time through the banner, first place is awarded 50 points. Second place will be awarded 49 points. And it goes down from there. So 6 sprints, 50 possible points each time is a total of 300 possible points, but there's actually a bit of a quirk to that too, is the final lap is worth double points. So there's a little bit more importance placed on finishing in first. So that double points makes the possible total equal to 350 points. So if it was one person that crosses in first all 6 times, they would get 350 points. That's as many as you can possibly get. But again, most likely that's not going to happen unless there's just one crazy strong rider. So points kind of add up along the way. So here we are. We're getting close to the end of the lead-in. I've ridden on Fan Flats quite a few times before. But for those who haven't seen it, it's kind of like there's this turnaround. If you look at that mini map in the top right of the screen, there's this turnaround, and once you hit that quick turn that we're coming up on right now is really when I should be thinking about upping my power going into the sprint. So we can see it's already kind of split apart. I waited a little bit too long to go there, so we finished the turn. I put down the power. Again, this is early in the race. We're just 4 kilometers in. We crossed through the start of the sprint, and I'm starting to go through a few riders. There's 2 more further off the front. I put in quite a bit of effort here to try to catch them. Get really close to this guy in second, but not quite able to catch him at the line. So that's one sprint out of the way, 1 of 6, and we got 3rd place there. So again, just kind of doing the mental math in my head that I'll be doing throughout the race of trying to remember where I finished and who are the other riders that finished ahead of me, and kind of starting to mark them as the laps go on. But what I'll do just for tracking purposes, in that bottom left of the screen, right under where it shows the sprint times right now, I'll just track kind of which place I got on every single sprint. And as that starts to unfold, we'll kind of see where I'm sitting as this race goes on. So first sprint out of the way, I hope I explained kind of how this sprint race works pretty well. Really the kind of dynamic that these sprint races create is a really surgy race, and we're seeing that here. Is it was a very slow start, a slow lead in, kind of around 500 meters, as we'll go ahead and kind of speed up as the pace slows down here and everyone's kind of just recuperating. But really around like 500 meters before that sprint banner, it started to get strung out. We had some people off the front. The pace really starts to increase going into the sprint. And then the second people cross that sprint line, everyone kind of takes the power off the pedals for a few seconds and takes time to recover. So it creates a really surgy race. Right here, a lot of people, I mean, we're not going fast. My watts are pretty much staying under 200. Everyone's really recovering, at least in the first half of this lap, before they start strategizing what to do for the next sprint. So yeah, I guess just talking through watts, since they're pretty low right now, but I weigh around just above 75 kilograms. So my weight has stayed pretty consistent. I actually reweighed myself just before this race and entered my updated weight into Zwift Power. I think it moved from like 75.2 kilograms to 75.6 or something like that. Just about a 1 pound difference. But just always want to be up to date. So at around that 75 kilogram mark, that means 150 watts would be 2 watts per kilogram. 225 watts would be 3 watts per kilogram. So around the level that I'm at is that 3.0 watts per kilogram is a pretty good like threshold or barometer for me of if I'm above that 3.0 watts per kilogram or 225 total watts, I'm usually pushing pretty hard. That's a pace that I can hold for a decent amount of time if it's not too surgy, but I'm definitely starting to increase that heart rate. If I'm below that 225 watts, it's a bit more of a recovery for me. So for the last few minutes, we've been below that 225 watts, which means my heart rate's remained pretty low. So heart rate in the 160s is extremely good for me. Once I start getting above 180 is where I'm really starting to push it. Above 185 is where I'm really kind of starting to drain myself. And above 190 is getting close to max. I don't really want to see that unless we're in a final sprint. I can really only hold that for a few minutes at a time before I would completely bonk and kind of have no energy left. So all right, kind of coming to the end of lap 1 here, just starting to think through my strategy. I know I have an Aero power-up, so that's big. There's a lot of different power-ups available in this race. Aero really means I can kind of hit the what should I say, front of the pack a little bit earlier, knowing that I can use that Aero, and I don't need to rely on draft quite as much as I would without that Aero power-up. So I know in the lead-in sprint, I left too late, which caused me to not be able to catch those last 2 riders at the end. So really kind of thinking into this sprint now, I want to leave a little bit earlier, and I know having the Aero power-up lets me get a little bit more risky with it. Like I'll be okay hitting that, leaving the draft a little bit earlier, if that makes sense. So we have 1 rider off the front coming into this kind of 180-degree turn. That rider has some decent distance on the pack. Around that turn, I'm on the outside, so I kind of get spit out to the back of the pack. Immediately decide to surge there. hit the front, and that's when I hit the aero boost, and I put in everything I have. So we're up to almost touch 900 watts. Didn't quite have it there. I know the pack's behind me, so I need to keep pushing here. That rider in front kind of slowed down coming through the sprint banner. Arrow runs out, crossed through the banner just barely by by like half a second. I was able to get first there. That pink rider came through maybe 1 or 2 meters after the line. So I was able to get first in that one. So now we have a third place and we have a first place. And now I'm starting to think through some of the competitors I've seen in this race and who I know is strong and who to look out for. The first one's this pink rider with the pink Tron bike just in front of me right now. So that's Terry LeDuc, and I actually kind of knew him before this race as well. So he's an extremely strong sprinter. I mentioned that I had done the Bullseye Points race once before, and he won that race, and it wasn't even close. He was, it felt like he was cycling in circles around all of us. And believe it or not, at one of the finish lines, he was like right before the sprint banner, he was so far in front of everyone that he literally did like a circle before he went through the sprint banner because he knew no one else was going to contest him. So I made a short of that. I'm not sure. I'll see if I can get it up on the screen here. Otherwise, go check it out after this. But I went ahead, skipped forward. Lap 2, not a whole lot happened. So that's why I jumped forward to kind of this sprint. This time I have the drafting boost, so I hang back a little bit longer. I wanted to make sure I was at the back of the pack there so I could get the full effect of the drafting boost. It actually worked out pretty well. This other rider that I'm passing now went early too, so I got continued use of that draft boost as I was in his draft and coming through. So again, find myself on the front, pushing as hard as possible, and again, just able to hold it off. So 2 back-to-back successful sprints really helped. So I like where I'm sitting now with a third place sprint and 2 firsts. In my head, I'm thinking I'm in first place, but I've also seen Terry, pink jersey, and he's been at the front in every single sprint. I know he's strong. So he's someone that I'm watching out for. The other rider is the one right in front of me right now. I guess everyone's kind of moving around, but it's a Canadian rider. His name was Oleg, I believe, and I had some time before the race to look into some of the competition, so I saw Terry had joined, knew he was going to be good, and then I saw Oleg's profile, and he had won this Bullseye Points race. It's like a series of 12 different races, and I believe last week was the first race in this new series. So Oleg had won that race, and then just kind of looking through his ZP profile, he's gotten gold and silver, and it feels like every single race that he's been in. He just won gold in the Race Scotland Stage 2 series on that crit circuit. If you haven't seen it already, my last video is an absolute blow up in that exact race where I got dropped by everybody. So I did not like that stage at all, and to see that he won it, I knew he was going to be a strong rider as well. So those were kind of the 2 that I pinpointed to watch during the race. And then kind of just, there's a few other familiar names that I've seen, but trying to just gauge where I'm at right now. So we're halfway through the sprints, feeling pretty good. Again, I'm pinpointing this pink rider on the right, and I think about now, he may have seen that I've won the last 2 sprints. So this is kind of where I noticed that he started following me. I don't know if he was doing it on purpose and he had actually kind of pinpointed me, or if we just so happened to be in the same spots in the pack, but because I was kind of doing the same thing to him. But here we go. So in the second half of the race, heart rate's getting higher. We're in the 170s now, but nothing crazy. And this time I actually don't have a power-up. So I don't have a power-up. I've won the last couple sprints that have taken a lot out of the legs. So I was able to get quite a bit of power in those first 3. This is where I really wasn't confident in my strategy. Going into the last few sprints, I've kind of had a strategy going into the sprint. Here I didn't. I thought it might be a good time to not take a sprint completely off, but just to kind of monitor the overall output and see how I could do in a sprint where I'm not putting out absolute max power. The goal here is, I know there's 2 sprints after this, and especially the final sprint is extremely important. So I kind of take this as a test of how far forward can I get while using the least amount of energy as possible. So we'll see how that works out. Some riders are going early off the front. I'm not going to go early. I'm kind of gauging it. I want to jump in the draft. I go a little bit later than I had previously. Here, staying in the draft the whole time. I see Terry flying. You can really see his sprint power there. He's got a crazy sprint. And ultimately, kind of finished further back in the pack. So that time I was 7th across the line. But again, heart rate's not crazy high. So the other sprints, I might have been up to 190 when I crossed the line. Here I was just barely above 180. So didn't use quite the same amount of power. But really wasn't happy with where I finished. 7th is kind of a dangerous place to be. So now I'm kind of not exactly sure where I stand in the overall pack. The bike I'm using for this race is the Uranium Nuclear, and I have the Zip 808 wheels on it. So it's pretty much the most aero setup that I have available to me right now, just based on my level. I don't have the Tron unlocked yet, but because there's so little elevation here, the goal is just to remain as aero as possible. So that's the setup I went with. Guys, thanks for sticking in. I hope you're enjoying this content. I've had a lot of new subscribers recently, so guys, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you watching these videos. It's a lot of fun making them. I've been doing it for, I think, just over 2 years now, so it's cool seeing all the support. I have the Wahoo Kickr Core trainer, so I've been on that for a couple years now. I bought my first road bike, I believe it was the fall of 2019, so it was just before COVID started. I kind of bought it at the perfect time, and then I got into Zwift just as COVID was starting. And I've kind of been on and off Zwift. I started as a D rider. I jumped up pretty quickly to the C category and made my way up the C ranks last year to the point, I think last February or March, I actually jumped into B for a few races before I took the summer off. So took the bike off the trainer over the summer and completely stepped away from Zwift, and then came back on in September, I believe. So came back on kind of as a mid-C. I've been kind of in between. I haven't officially jumped to B yet, but done both B and C races and having a lot of fun with it. So here we are, middle of lap 4. This is kind of where it starts to get interesting. I tried coming into this race with some confidence. I feel like a lot of times I kind of follow moves, and I'm more the nail than I am the hammer. So kind of wanted to switch things up and see how it worked. We're on just the small uphill portion that's kind of in the middle of this lap. I noticed that there were some D riders in front of us. So there were other categories on the course. I kind of just roll off the front here. So I start putting in like 350 to 400 watts. I roll through that Cat D group. I use this featherweight, and I'm just going to try to hold consistent power and see if I can gain any gap on this group behind me. So I see the gaps already at 4 seconds. This might be, I probably got this idea from watching Ed Laverack's stream. I don't know if you've seen him race before. Really good A rider. He's done this in ZRL and won a few times doing it. So he's best of the best, top A rider. I'm just a lowly Cat C, but I really want to kind of be in charge of this group, if that makes sense. I don't want to sit back, and I know there's some really good sprinters. Terry has much better sprint power than I do. That's the rider in the pink. So if I let every single lap come down to a sprint, he's going to beat me, and that's just how it's going to go. So I need to switch things up. I roll off the front, and this is where I really have to dig in. So heart rate's high. We're at 186. Again, not sustainable, but this is an effort that's pretty important right now. I'm trying to put time into the group, and I am. So I take another look at that screen to the right, and it's to 11 seconds now. So kind of now getting into like the last quarter, or maybe even last 20% of this lap, and just trying to make that gap grow. I'm really digging in deep, getting that heart rate closer to 190. The watts are starting to come down. I was able to get it to like 400, 450 maybe at the start of this effort. Now I'm kind of struggling to keep it above 300, but the gap is still growing. So, and I also see one of the riders is making an effort off the front. So the main group is now 14 seconds behind, but there's this other rider, Schaefer, who probably noticed me go off the front and is really working now to bring me back. I think overall the tactic worked pretty well. And because there was that group of D riders, I wasn't really noticed immediately. But Schaefer noticed, and the group's kind of still lagging behind. So Schaefer is closing the gap down to 7 seconds, and we're still not extremely close to the sprint portion, to the point that he might be able to bring it back before I can cross the line. But the group, again, 15 seconds behind, really isn't pushing. And this is the second last lap before the final sprint. So Schaefer's still bringing it back within 5 seconds. We make this turn, getting close to the upcoming sprint, and I kind of just have to put in some final power here. I know if I put in just a little bit, I'll be able to hold him off. I wasn't really happy the lap before when I finished in 7th, so decided to make this move just because I didn't want to rely on that sprint again. It probably ended up taking out more energy doing this kind of breakaway for a few minutes, but it guaranteed first place, and that's what I was looking for. So Schaefer has the gap down to 3 seconds. I crossed the line, and this is where I feel a little bit of indecision. So it worked for 1 lap. We're down to the final lap now, and it was about 14 seconds on the group. During the sprint, though, it went down to 10. Now we're down to 7. Schaefer's caught me just a second behind. And now I look up, and after the sprint, the group's only 4 or 5 seconds behind. So in my head, I kind of decided to call it quits here. If I was able to maintain that 14 to 15 second gap, I probably would have kept going and just see if I could have held it off all the way to the line for this full lap. Once it got down to that 4 or 5 seconds, it just wasn't possible. So I kind of took it off a little bit and let this group catch me. So here we are now. Final lap. Looking at that bottom left. So I have 3rd, 1st, 7th, and 1st. I'm really worried that 7th hurt me quite a bit, especially because I saw Terry finished pretty far in front of me on that one finish. So still by no means am I thinking in my head like, oh, I might be in 1st right now, I might be in 2nd. I'm just trying to mark Terry as a rider and finish this off as strong as possible. So we'll speed things up a little bit going into this final lap. The other thing is I'm not quite sure if that 4th lap was the best idea or best place to put in that longer effort, just because it was so close to the finish. So I put in that effort, and now I just have a few K to recover before we get to the final sprint. So if I had put that effort in on maybe the 3rd lap instead of the 4th, I could have been fresher for a sprint finish. So yeah, just kind of things I'm thinking about as I'm rewatching this race, but not necessarily all stuff that I was thinking about while I was in the race itself. So at this point, I'm just starting to think about the sprint finish, trying to stay in the group as much as possible. There were 2 riders that went off the front. I kind of played a little bit of a game there. I knew I wasn't going to chase them because Terry wasn't in that group, and I saw a few other strong riders here that didn't go off the front. But I typed in the chat, I just said 2 off ? Thinking that maybe that would entice someone or part of this group to increase the speed and make the catch. It did a little bit, as we have one more rider kind of off the front now, trying to catch that front pack, but ultimately I don't think it worked extremely well. We're under a mile left. I think there was actually maybe just one off the front, and now that second one was chasing, or it might be 3 off the front. So I'm not exactly sure where we're at. I know Terry's still in this group with me, along with some of the other strong riders. So just 1.2 kilometers left. At this point, I don't want to stick my head in the wind at all. I want to be in the draft as much as possible, conserve as much energy as I can for the final sprint. So we're into just about the last K. Heart rate's at 182, which isn't crazy high with just a kilometer left. So again, I kind of try to play a little tactic. I noticed those riders on the front are starting to get away. I kind of put in a fake effort there in which I kind of went to the front, put in like 300 watts for a second, and then stopped pedaling, trying to increase the speed of this group without actually being the one to do it, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I'm new to all of this, like, mind games and race tactics. So if you guys have different ideas, definitely let me know. But my goal here was I want to increase the speed of this group to see if we can still catch those riders off the front without actually being the person to do it. So it seemed smart at the time. I'm not sure it really had any effect when it comes down to it, but 500 meters to go now, getting a little strung out. So I'm still in the draft right now. I'm not in the group, but there's these few riders making a nice line off the front. So trying to still stick in the draft. I have the Aero power up. I put in one quick dig just to up my speed. One more rider has the Aero. I hit the Aero too. I ended up going pretty early, so that was maybe the 400 meter mark that I used the Aero. Again, I know Terry's a great sprinter, so I wanted to catch him a little bit by surprise. It didn't work. He had the draft power up. He was all over it. And he comes around me at the line. I kind of stand back up and give it everything I have left. But man, he beats me there. So he beats me in the final sprint. But I'll go ahead and put up the final sprint standings, and I won. So this was my first sprint race win. It's my first C race win in a couple months at least. So was really happy with that. It really helped after I got dropped so early the last race to come back with this win and had a lot of fun with it. I mean, this points race really makes racing interesting, adds a lot of extra tactics, and I was able to get the win, and it was just by a point. So that just shows that every single position, every single lap counts. If I had gotten 8th in that one sprint instead of 7th, I might not have won this points race. So every single lap matters. The last lap is doubly important, and guys, had a lot of fun with this one. I'm definitely going to be doing more points races. Herd puts on a great series. So guys, this was a longer one. I hope you enjoyed the voiceover. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the support. And until the next one, this is Cadman Cycling. I'll catch you then. Bye.